Essendon are looking to extend Brad Scott's contract until the end of 2027. Is this the right thing to do? We're going to have a bit of a talk about this in this video, as well as what's going on with Darcy Parish. So the news that was coming out of Essendon yesterday, as discussed by Tom Morris, is that Essendon is looking to extend Brad Scott's coaching contract until the end of 2027.
But why?
So the current situation, for those that aren't aware, is that Brad Scott is currently contracted until the end of 2026. And Essendon are looking to extend the deal until at least the end of 2027. Essendon wants to promote stability and all stuff like that. I think I understand where they're coming from. David Barham is the president, and his tenure also ends in 2027. And there's some suggestion that he will want to transition to Andrew Welsh around that time. So whether these two things are linked remains to be seen. So is this a good move? I'm not sure Essendon need to be rushing into anything like this.
We don't make mistakes.
I actually do rate Brad Scott as a coach. I think he's the alpha male. I think he's the kind of coach other players respect. But the reality is that, all that aside, he has coached Essendon for 2 years. We've had 2 11th place finishes. We've won 11 games in both seasons. So why extend him now? What is the purpose of doing it now? What if we have a poor year?
Kind of seems like you're rushing into it a little bit.
I think everything points to the fact that we're underrated and we're probably going to be a little bit better than what people think. I think we've had a pretty good pre-season, but we don't know that. We don't know what's going to happen. So we could have a bad year. We could start the season with 5 or 6 losses, who knows, and then it's not going to look like it's a very smart deal. So why would you lock it in now? What is the purpose of this? Essendon has also fallen for this in the past. I think I remember Matthew Knights being extended and then having to pay him out.
Learn from my mistakes, Daniel.
I mean, there's all sorts of problems, and this has happened with other clubs before, where teams have got off to, good starts in years, or things have looked positive, so they've extended, coaches' contracts, and then they've had to get rid of them and endure long payouts. So I don't think this is necessarily something we need to rush into. Brad Scott's probably looked at this himself, and probably, he's got a young family, probably wants to secure his future, which I understand. I'd do the same thing and want to make sure my future is financially secure. But I don't know if Essendon really need to be rushing into this, especially when we haven't made the finals yet under Brad Scott. If you like this video and the content I provide, please hit the like button and also subscribe. It helps the YouTube algorithm when you do that. About 80% of the people watching this are not subscribed, and it only takes 1 second to do so. It would help me out a lot and allow me to produce even better content for you going forward. From the club's point of view, I can see where they're going with this. Brad Scott came to Essendon in 2023, didn't do an off-season, sort of came in for the pre-season, and now this is his third season, second off-season, so now it's fully his team. He owns this team now, and they see him as a long-term coach. And, long-term coaches, when you think of long-term coaches, you think of coaches that are in charge for 8 to 10 years, and Essendon want to promote some stability. We haven't had a long-term coach, obviously, since Kevin Sheedy.
Hard to believe it's been so long.
And we've had a number of coaches since then, and none have been successful. So I understand what Essendon are trying to do. I just don't know why you would rush into it.
Just kind of seems like you're rushing into it a little bit.
There's no purpose in rushing into it, and it's the kind of thing that can backfire, and there can be egg on your face if it just, for whatever reason, doesn't work out. If Essendon do extend Brad Scott's contract soon, and they do it in the next few weeks, or certainly before the end of the year and before we've established ourselves as, a good team this year, and we, like I said, we may or may not be, it will show that they believe he is the man. Regardless of what happens this year, they believe he is the man. And as I've stated in previous videos, I do think we've had a pretty good pre-season. I do think things are on the right track. And importantly, I do think there's signs from a lot of the younger players that things are progressing. One thing I was very, very encouraged about in the 2 pre-season games was the fact that our 2 leading ball getters in both the Bulldogs game and the Geelong game were not the Merritt, Parish, Durham, Caldwell, Martin, quintet, even though Parish wasn't playing. It was actually Hobbs and Sartis, who weren't really part of the team last year. And this is the type of thing under Brad that I'd like to see. New players starting to emerge, which, at least from the limited exposure that we've seen of the team so far over the off-season, we've started to see some promising signs from some of the younger players. We saw Zach Johnson tear it up in the VFL over the weekend. So all this is the sort of thing that I think the club has been pretty happy with during the off-season, which is why they're talking about extending Brad so early. But, and it is a big but, the reality is, all those things aside, there are positive signs. I've been far more optimistic about Essendon so far this year than I have been in other years. But the reality is that we still haven't achieved anything yet, and we've still faded away badly in the 2 seasons that he has been coached so far, which is a problem that Essendon coaches before Brad have had to endure all the way back since James Hird. This fading out problem in late in seasons has really existed probably since about 2011, really, when James Hird took over Essendon. We started the season strongly in that season and the following season, and then fell away completely towards the end of the year. And this is something that's been quite common with the Bombers over the last probably decade and a half, and we haven't seen Brad in the 2 years that he's been coach address that. But we've had 2 11-win seasons, so it hasn't been too bad. So what do you guys think about this? I'd like to see your thoughts in the comments. Would you like to see Brad Scott extended for another couple of years until at least the end of 2027? You've got the whole stability aspect, which is important. There's putting faith in the man that you've picked, which is important. I get all those things. They're valid arguments to this. I'd just like to see some results come through first. That's all. I'd just like to see some results come through first before we start even talking about this. I certainly understand Brad's point of view. He wants to lock in his financial future. I'd be doing exactly the same thing if I was him. He wants to lock in some stability, given that he's got a young family. And I think all those things are important from his point of view. But what do you guys think? Should we be locking in Brad Scott for an extended period of time? It's been a promising pre-season, and hopefully we're going to have an encouraging performance against Hawthorn on the weekend. But I think I personally just would have waited until we see some confirmation that things are on the right track. So the other news coming out about Essendon regards Darcy Parish. Now, we know that Darcy Parish has been dealing with lingering back issues over the pre-season, which is very, very annoying. Over the last probably 4 or 5 years, he's really been our second best midfielder behind Zach Merritt. I know people have been frustrated with him, particularly over the last couple of years, and there are some issues of whether he should have, Essendon should have agreed to sign the long contract that he's on. That's not his fault, obviously. He's entitled to ask for as much as he can get and, shore up his financial future. I get that. But we want to make sure Darcy's right. This is a guy that finished 5th in the Brownlow medal in 2021, averaging about 31 possessions a game. Hasn't quite been the same since, and he just hasn't quite got his body right. And I've said this in previous videos. Darcy Parish is one of those players that needs 3 or 4 games under his belt before he sort of reaches his peak. Some players, when they come back from injury, can be at their best straight away. Darcy Parish is not really one of those players. When he comes back from injury, he's not at his best in his first game. He sort of usually builds into his preparation, and once he gets through 3 or 4 games uninjured, he's then able to play his best football. We saw last year, he'd come back in this first game, he wasn't that great, and second game he was a bit better, third game a bit better again, and he's just about ready to peak, and then he'd get injured again. So for those that are a bit frustrated with him, I just ask them to remember that he's the type of player that builds into a season. He's the type of player that gets better the more games he has under his belt. He's just that type of player. So what's going on with him is that Darcy Parish has tweaked his running style in a bid to overcome his back and calf-related injuries. He's sought a specialist in recent weeks to address his running gait to eliminate the issues that is causing his ongoing back and soft tissue injuries. And apparently, according to the Herald Sun, he's on the verge of a breakthrough as he prepares to rejoin the main group and increase his training load as part of a step forward. He's aiming to return in about a month in the VFL. I think this is the right way to go about it. I know the easiest thing to do is to rush Darcy back into the team, but I don't think that's the right to go. I mean, there might be some case with that for some players, but not with Parish. I think with Parish, you just want to get him right, just because, like I said, he's just that type of player. Essendon football manager Daniel McPherson said Parish had sought a reassessment on the mechanics of his running style to help take the pressure off his back. McPherson said you get different opinions from external sources every now and again. And with Parish, it was like, yeah, let's have a look at a couple of different things. There are a couple of slight tweaks in his running gait, but I was watching him running this morning, McPherson said, and he looks the same, so there are minor adjustments to make. So Parish complained of back soreness before Christmas and has been in limited training for a couple of months now. You would have heard any reports of training. He's just been running laps mainly and not really engaging in full training. So he'll have to undertake a strong conditioning block to get back into the senior team. And, you know, if he's not going to make his debut in the VFL till round 4, you'd expect he wouldn't be back in the senior team until about round 7 or 8. So the club is saying that they're not going to rush Parish's recovery, given that he only played 12 games last year and has had, you know, a year or even a little bit more than a year of injury issues. McPherson has gone on to say it's mainly the back which has been the thing that they're worried about. It's been on and off for a while, but that was what slowed him up over Christmas. But it seems like it's on the right track now. So at least they're admitting that there's a problem. I think sometimes people and clubs are keen to rush players back before they're ready. At least they're admitting that they know what the problem is. They're trying to address his running gait. I've never heard of anyone addressing the way they run. How do you address the way you run? The way you run is pretty, you know, sort of ingrained in the way that you play. I would have thought that's a difficult thing to change. But look, you know, I'm not a physiology expert. If there's a way that you can alter your running gait, well, I guess if that's going to help you, then that's going to help you. So hopefully Darcy can get right. We can get him back playing in the VFL in a couple of weeks, and that will hopefully mean he'll be ready to get into the senior team by about round 7 or 8, and there'll be plenty of time left for him to make a significant contribution in this season. So what do you guys think about the two things? Brad Scott having his contract potentially extended, Darcy Parish altering his running gait. That's an interesting thing. I never thought I would read about someone altering the way they run, and hopefully getting him back in the team in probably 6 to 7 weeks. I think it's very, very important. I think he's an underrated player for us who probably cops a little bit more criticism than he deserves. So hit a like on this video, leave a message in the comments, let me know what you think. And as always, have a great day.